Hello there, I'm Callum Johns, and welcome to the EU in Review, where I review the Star Wars Expanded Universe as I experience it. Now this time I'm going to be continuing on with the classic Marvel Star Wars comic run. This time I'm going to be covering issues 58 to 59, because they connect together in a little story arc that they've got in a couple of issues there. So, as always, I'll just get straight into the comics here because I don't really have a blurb to read first, with the notes that I wrote down as I'm reading. So, issue 58 is written by David Michelinie and illustrated by Walt Simonson and Tom Palmer. One of the first things I noticed were the rods on Arbor for providing energy for the rebels is an interesting use for them. But what I've also thought of with using this as a source of energy, I know the Hoot Jeeps are surviving on them for ages, but the extra load that the rebels take for their gear to use, wouldn't that make it so it's not really sustainable? Would they use too much energy? The narration says it's near limitless, so I guess it's not. Well, it's interesting to think that what if they did overtax it and they stopped becoming a sustainable source for the energy? And it's also interesting how Shira seems to imply that she thinks that Luke likes her, as far as attractive wise, and playing on all of the emotions with Luke there, of physical attraction and loving and that sort of stuff. I like how they do this in these old Marvel comics. They don't shy away from trying to play with people's emotions a bit and putting those sorts of things in. It's cool. This is the first appearance of the Kurtzberg generator, Kertsbhrg. I'm assuming it's pronounced Kurtzberg, which could possibly be a reference to Frederick Herzberg, who's an American psychologist. And I did a little Google just out of interest, and he has something called a two-factor theory. It's not related to this at all, but it's something to do with job satisfaction. And there's a two-factor theory that he has there, so someone could look it up if they want. Frederick Herzberg could be a connection to the Kurtzberg generator. They just changed the name a little bit. But I thought it's interesting that they make a pyramidal device made of 3 Kurtzberg generators to protect the fleet in the sun. So they actually go inside of the layers of the sun and use the Kurtzberg generators to protect them. I think this is a cool idea, but I think that it's also a bit odd, because the rebels always had second-hand tech and all that sort of stuff. I'm wondering why they have this advanced technology rather than having to rely on something a bit older, not as common, not as up-to-date, I should say. Also, wouldn't it have a better use for these Kurtzberg generators stopping all of the heat coming in as a defense against lasers? Because it says it's able to withstand over 3 million degrees. I'm assuming that's Fahrenheit, because these are US comics. It doesn't matter too much, it's a huge amount. But yeah, I'm thinking, wouldn't they be able to be used against lasers? Because lasers are basically superheated things. Or even you could have a personal one for protection against a lightsaber, with it being that protective. It's a good idea, but there's possibilities with these Kurtzberg generators. They may be a bit big though, to use for personal shields. What's also interesting is a shuttle has shields strong enough to pass through the corona of the sun. Now, the amount of degrees that the corona of the sun would need one of these Kurtzberg generators. It seems like the shields are really powerful when they're going into heat, but they're not as powerful when they're in space warfare with lasers and stuff, which, just wondering, I guess natural elements are harder to protect against than other lasers, a different application of the shields and that. Now, something really bit stupid really is I don't know why Leia left without the droids. Because surely you go, oh, is everyone here? And then take off. But instead she just went, I'm gonna leave. And so I don't know why Leia left without the droids unless she intended them to stay there with them. in the first place. So, that happens. It's just one of those things you go, huh? It's an interesting choice to focus on the droids adventure more, I thought. Probably around the same time that the cartoon came out. And the droids cartoon came out before, and it was possibly around the same time that came out, so they wanted to focus on the droid stories as well. And it switches to Lando and Luke, and they're playing a game of Nova Crown. Now, they don't really explain what it is, but it's its first and only appearance. So that's a game that could have been picked up by other parts of the EU, but it wasn't. And yeah, it says later on that Leia thought 3PO was on the shuttle. So she didn't even check that everyone was on the shuttle before she took off. Anyway, just Leia being a bit oblivious and narrow-minded, I think. If you have tunnel vision, then you won't notice things. And at this point as well, I thought, how silly are you to put your whole fleet in the sun where you won't be able to get them out very easily especially if something goes wrong, like the Kurtzberg generator starting to fail or something. How stupid are you to risk the whole fleet while doing that? Surely you have most of the fleet somewhere else, and that's just sort of a part of it. In one part, it says take elusive action instead of taking evasive action. So I guess they're trying to be elusive. Evasive makes sense to me. I thought it was also interesting that they send out comm signals while the TIE fighters are scanning in the area. The rebels aren't very smart in this comic, because the Imperials will pick up the comm traffic and know that someone's there. But they seem oblivious as well. For the plot, 3PO actually going out in space and performing manual work out in space like a space trooper is funny, I thought. It's interesting that 3PO can actually go and do that since he's only a protocol droid. And also Lando and Luke being in the market is an interesting contrast to the tones of the drama at the Arbor Sun. So they're in the space system with Arbor, and their bases at the moment. It's contrasting tones with where they are, which I thought was interesting. Now, issue 59, which is also written by David Michelini and illustrated by Walt Simonson and Tom Palmer, is titled Bazaar, which is just a different way of spelling the bazaar like a market. And yeah, which is certainly what some of these issues are, is what I wrote down, because it's also only a letter different from bizarre, which is just weird. Anyway, Lando in a new outfit I thought was cool to see, while Luke returns to his Bespin one. For whatever reason, they like reusing their outfits for some of them while giving others new ones. It's a bit weird that a guy just comes up and tries to sell Lando. Yeah. That's culturally sensitive now, isn't it? They wouldn't allow that to pass this day and age, but they did back then. This also takes place during the last issue's story, so it all connects together. Credits are shown as paper money rather than chits and other things we see in other material places. There's one panel where Chewie's face looks too cutesy, is what I'd call it. It just looks not like Chewie really, it looks too cute. And it's interesting as well as this bloke called Ferret, which is a funny name anyway, has an assistant Plor that basically looks like a hunchback and reminds me of Igor from Frankenstein. It also mentions coffee grounds. So coffee is nice and exists in Star Wars. I know CAF does, but it actually mentions coffee grounds specifically. So there you go. I guess they make the coffee grounds and then it becomes CAF. And they make it. And a bit weird with the art here is in some panels Luke's outfit turns white, and then in others it's brown. I guess it's because of lighting, but it's still a bit inconsistent. I thought shouldn't have worn new boots, said by Lando, was a funny joke. And there's a giant centipede monster, which I thought was interesting. Bit of a staple in these old issues to have the giant monsters, going back to the Waterworld arc is one of the main ones I'm thinking of. Some of the other ones, just giant monsters, more like Marvel comics and stuff, I guess, which is who produced it. And of course Luke is with his lightsaber again when he shouldn't have his lightsaber. This is after Empire Strikes Back and before Return of the Jedi. He hasn't even constructed his new one. But I guess they're not caring about that as much. It's interesting that Ferret can send a mental signal to Plor. I'm not sure if this is use of the Force, but not trained in any other way, or if they do something with technology, but they didn't really explain how it works other than he can do it. And when they go to find what they need, they also encounter some people that call themselves hobos. Pretty much because they're homeless and they found this junk planet to live on. Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. It's interesting that there's a liquid that becomes rock-hard crystal. That seems to be similar to carbonite in a way, but it doesn't have to be processed as much. And then it also gives you a bit more of a look on Plor. I thought it was more like Hunchback and stuff, but actually apparently he's on wheels. So he lost his legs and then attached some wheels to the bottom. How that works. There's some of the oddities of the early Marvel comics, but it's a interesting idea to make the cyborg like that. And I love how Chewie just breaks the crystal, because this liquid that becomes rock hard crystal pours on Chewie and hardens around him, but then he just breaks it. I love how they show Wookiee strength in these Marvel comics. I think it's funny that Lando thinks he'll go down in the history books, then it's shut down when Luke pops up. Because Luke's the one that everyone sees as the hero. And I think it's cool how it shows that Chewie can disassemble and then reassemble his bowcaster. And he keeps the parts in his utility belt and can just put it together. I think that's really cool. I was excited, but then Lando and Luke turned up. It looked like Chewie was actually going to rip Ferret's head off. That would have been a cool scene to have in there. He's just ruthlessly ripping his head off. But of course, they can't go too far. And they come to the good guys. And then Luke actually refers to the people as hobos. So they just basically call the people hobos, which is funny. It makes a comment about wanting Luke to change his uniform, which is interesting. It's probably a play on that he didn't change it for ages in the comics after A New Hope, and in some of the extra Star Wars bits in the things like the letters to the editors that they respond to questions sent by fans. So I remember reading that they talked a little bit about that in some of these comics. So overall, a bit fun. Have to suspend my disbelief a bit, and some things possibly a little bit fun. Don't quite make sense comparing the technology levels, but yeah, there's some really nice moments in here. And I'm enjoying these as I read them along. So if you've read these comics, what do you think of them? And that's all I have for you this time, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.